Rejected by everyone, she was only asked one simple question by a rancher. In a quiet and faraway frontier town, surrounded by wide open fields, dusty roads, and endless skies, lived a young woman whose life had become a story of silence and rejection. The town was small, where everyone knew each other and where words spread faster than the wind. But for her, those words were never kind. She once belonged somewhere. She had a family, a small piece of land, and dreams that felt simple but warm. But life changed quickly. After her family lost their land due to debts and difficult times, everything started falling apart. One by one, people she trusted began to leave her side. Relatives stopped answering her calls for help. Friends who once smiled at her slowly turned their faces away. Even neighbors who once greeted her now looked at her as if she did not exist. It was not just loss of property for her. It was loss of belonging. With nowhere to go, she tried to survive on her own. She moved closer to the edge of town, where things were quieter and life was harder. She started doing small jobs wherever she could find them. Sometimes she cleaned horse stables. Sometimes she carried water buckets. And sometimes she helped in kitchens just for a small meal or a few coins. It was not a life she ever imagined, but it was the only way she could stay alive. Every day was a struggle, but she never complained. She learned to stay quiet, to keep her head down, and to avoid attention. In that town, attention often meant judgment, and she had already experienced enough of that. People began to see her as someone less important, not because she had done something wrong, but because she had lost everything. In their eyes, she had nothing left to offer. Some ignored her completely, while others treated her like she was just part of the background, like an old broken fence or a forgotten road. Still, she continued working. She believed that if she kept going, maybe one day things would change. Maybe life would give her another chance. But deep inside, she often felt tired. Not just tired from work, but tired from being unseen. One late afternoon, the sky turned golden as the sun began to set behind the hills. The wind was soft, carrying dust through the empty streets. She had finished her small chores for the day and was walking slowly toward the edge of town. Her hands were rough from work, and her clothes were simple and worn, but she did not care anymore about appearance. She only cared about surviving the next day. She stopped near an old wooden fence outside town. It was a quiet place where no one usually came. She liked it there because it felt less heavy than the town itself. Sitting down on the dry ground, she rested her back against the fence and looked at the sky. The orange and pink colors reminded her of a life she once dreamed of. Peaceful, safe, and full of hope. For a moment, she closed her eyes. She did not know that someone was watching her from a distance. At that same time, a wealthy rancher was riding toward the town. He was known across the region for his large cattle ranch, strong business mind, and calm personality. Unlike many powerful men, he did not carry pride in his eyes. Instead, he observed everything quietly. He believed that a person's true value was not shown by their clothes or wealth, but by their character. As he rode closer, his horse slowed down. Something caught his attention near the fence. A young woman sitting alone, away from everyone else. There was no drama, no noise around her, just silence. But something about that silence felt different to him. He did not see someone useless or forgotten. He saw someone tired, but still holding on. Most people in the town had passed her without a second thought, but he did not. He gently stopped his horse at a distance and watched her for a moment. She was unaware of him. Her head was slightly down, and she looked lost in thoughts that no one else could hear. The rancher felt something unusual, not pity, not curiosity, but a sense of interest in her quiet strength. There was something real about her presence, something that could not be easily explained. And in that moment, instead of riding past like everyone else, he made a decision that would soon change both of their lives. He slowly got down from his horse and began walking toward her. The town, still behind him, had no idea that a simple encounter at the edge of a fence was about to become the beginning of a completely different story. The evening wind was calm, and the sky was slowly turning darker as the sun moved behind the distant hills. The young woman was still sitting near the old wooden fence at the edge of the town. She did not know that her quiet moment was about to be interrupted in a way she could never imagine. Behind her, the sound of horse hooves slowly approached. At first, she did not notice it. She was used to sounds of carts, horses, and people passing by without caring. In her life, most things moved around her, not toward her. So she kept looking at the ground, lost in her tired thoughts. But this time, the horse stopped. A man had arrived. He was not an ordinary traveler. He was a well-known rancher, respected in many towns for his large land, strong work ethic, and calm behavior. People said he rarely spoke too much, but when he did, his words carried weight. He was someone who observed more than he judged. He sat on his horse for a moment, looking at the girl from a short distance. Most people in his position would not have stopped. Most would have passed by without even noticing someone like her sitting alone at the edge of the town. But he did not move forward. Something about her caught his attention. She was not dressed in anything special. Her clothes were old, simple, and slightly dusty from hard work. Her hands showed signs of labor, and her posture showed exhaustion. But there was something deeper in her presence. Even though she looked tired, she did not look broken inside. It was as if she was holding on to something invisible. The rancher slowly got down from his horse. The sound of his boots touching the ground made her slightly lift her head. She noticed him now. For a moment, their eyes met. She quickly looked away, feeling nervous. In her experience, when people like him came close, it usually meant trouble or judgment. She expected him to ask her to move or say something harsh, like others often did. But he did not speak immediately. Instead, he looked at her quietly, as if trying to understand her situation without words. The silence between them felt long, but it was not uncomfortable. It was different from the silence she usually felt alone. This silence felt like someone was actually noticing her for the first time. Finally, he spoke in a calm voice. "You have been sitting here for a while," he said. She did not answer right away. She was unsure if she should speak at all. People in her life had taught her that speaking often led to more pain than silence. But something in his tone was different. It was not rude. It was not mocking. It was simply calm. So she nodded slightly, but said nothing. The rancher took a few steps closer, but still kept a respectful distance. He did not want to make her uncomfortable. He looked toward the town behind her, then back at her. "This place treats people in strange ways," he said slowly. "It forgets those who struggle." She listened quietly, but still avoided eye contact. The rancher noticed her hesitation. He understood that trust does not come easily. especially to someone who has been ignored for a long time. After a short pause, he asked something simple. Do you have anywhere to go? The question was soft, but it felt heavy to her. No one had asked her something like that in a long time. It was not an insult or command. It was a question that showed concern. She hesitated again, then shook her head slowly. The rancher nodded as if he already expected that answer. For a moment, he looked at her with a thoughtful expression. He was not in a hurry. He was not judging her situation. Instead, he seemed to be thinking deeply. The girl felt confused. She did not understand why he was still there. Most people would have left by now, but he remained standing, as if her presence mattered. Then, after a pause, he spoke again. Would you consider something different? He asked. She finally looked at him directly. This time, her eyes showed curiosity mixed with fear. She did not know what he meant. The rancher continued in a steady voice. I have land outside this town. Work is hard, but it is honest. You would not be alone, and you would not be ignored. His words were simple, but they carried meaning. It was not charity spoken with pity. It sounded like an offer based on possibility. The girl stayed silent for a long moment. Her mind struggled to process what she was hearing. Life had not offered her choices in a long time. She was used to taking whatever came, not being asked. The rancher waited patiently. He did not rush her. He simply stood there, giving her space to think. The wind moved softly around them. The town behind them continued its normal life, unaware that a single question near an old fence was slowly opening a new path. And for the first time in many days, the girl felt something unfamiliar rise inside her. Not hope yet, but the beginning of it. The wind moved gently across the open land as the sun continued to sink lower behind the hills. The sky had changed into deeper shades of orange and soft purple. Near the old wooden fence, the young woman stood quietly, still unsure of what to do with the words she had just heard. A simple question had been asked, but for her, it felt like something much bigger. The rancher was still standing there, calm and patient. He did not rush her. He did not repeat himself. He simply waited, as if her answer mattered more than anything else in that moment. The girl looked down at her hands. They were rough, tired, and marked by long days of hard work. She thought about everything she had been through, being ignored, being rejected, and being treated like she had no value. Life had taught her to expect nothing. And now, suddenly, someone was offering her something. Not pity, not insult, but a chance. Her heart felt heavy. She did not know if she should trust it. People in her life had made promises before, but those promises never stayed. She had learned to protect herself by expecting disappointment. The rancher noticed her silence. He understood it was not easy for her. He stayed calm and said nothing more. His silence was not pressure, it was space. A few moments passed. In the distance, the town continued its usual evening routine. Lights began to appear in windows. People moved about, talking, laughing, living their normal lives. But none of them noticed what was happening near the fence. A small moment, quiet and simple, but full of meaning. Finally, the girl slowly lifted her eyes and looked at him again. This land, your land, she said softly. Why would you offer it to someone like me? Her voice was uncertain, almost like she was afraid of her own question. The rancher did not answer immediately. He looked toward the open fields, then back at her. His expression stayed calm. "Because I see someone who is still standing," he replied. "Even after everything." His words were simple, but they touched something deep inside her. She had never heard anyone say something like that about her before. People usually saw her past, her situation, or her struggles, but no one had spoken about her strength in that way. Still, doubt remained in her mind. She took a small step back. "I don't belong anywhere," she said quietly. "People already decided that." The rancher shook his head slightly. "People decide many things," he said, "but that does not always make them true." The girl looked away again. Her emotions were mixed. A part of her wanted to believe him. Another part was afraid of being disappointed again. She turned her gaze toward the ground and stayed silent. The rancher then did something unexpected. He removed his hat slightly and spoke in a softer tone. "I am not asking you to trust the world," he said. "I am only asking you to trust one chance." That sentence stayed in the air longer than the others. A single chance. Not a promise of an easy life. Not a guarantee of happiness. Just a chance. The girl's thoughts became more complicated. She remembered every door that had been closed on her, every time she had asked for help and received nothing, every moment she had felt invisible. But now, standing here, she was being seen, not judged, not pushed away. Seen. She slowly sat down again near the fence, trying to calm her thoughts. The rancher did not interrupt her. He simply stood a short distance away, giving her space. Time passed quietly. The sky became darker, and the first stars started to appear above them. The world around them felt still, almost like it was waiting for her decision too. Inside her mind, a struggle continued. If I go with him, what if it is another disappointment? She thought. But another thought followed. If I stay here, nothing will ever change. Her life had been the same for so long that even the idea of change felt strange. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, she looked at the rancher. This time, her expression was different, still uncertain, but less afraid. "I don't know if I can trust this," she said honestly. The rancher nodded. "That is fine," he replied. "Trust is not required today, only a decision." Those words became the turning point. The girl slowly stood up. Her hands were still shaking slightly, but her voice was steadier now. "If I come," she said, "I don't want to be treated like I was before." The rancher gave a small, respectful nod. "You won't be," he said. A long silence followed. Then, for the first time, she gave a small, uncertain nod in return. It was not full trust. It was not full acceptance, but it was something new. A beginning. The rancher turned slightly toward his horse, preparing to leave the edge of town. The girl stood still, watching him, realizing that her life was no longer standing in the same place it was an hour ago. And as they both moved forward into the fading light, neither of them fully understood yet that this simple decision near an old fence would soon change everything they thought they knew. Dot. The early morning sun rose slowly over the wide open land outside the town. Golden light spread across the fields, touching the grass, the wooden fences, and the distant barns of the ranch. The air was fresh, quiet, and different from the crowded, judgment-filled streets of the town. The young woman stood near the edge of a large wooden wagon, holding a small bundle of her few belongings. She had left the town behind. It was not an easy decision, but it was the first step she had taken towards something unknown. The rancher stood a few steps away, watching calmly. He did not speak much. He never made her feel rushed or unwanted. His silence was steady, like the land around them. As the horses moved and workers passed by, the ranch slowly came alive. This was a place full of hard work, but also structure and purpose. Everything had a role, and every person had a task. It was different from the town where she had felt invisible. The girl looked around carefully. She had never lived in a place like this before. The wide land made her feel both small and free at the same time. It was unfamiliar, but not unkind. The rancher finally spoke. "You will start slow," he said. "No pressure. Just learn." She nodded slightly. She was still unsure, but she was listening. A worker came forward and showed her a small room near the side of the main barn. It was simple but clean. A bed, a chair, and a window facing the open fields. It was more than she had expected. For a moment, she just stood there. She had not had a space like this in a long time, a place that was hers, even if it was small. Days began to pass. At first, she was quiet. She watched everything carefully. She learned how the ranch worked, feeding animals, cleaning areas, carrying supplies. The work was not easy, but it was honest. No one insulted her. No one ignored her either. That was something new for her. The rancher did not treat her like a guest, but he also did not treat her like someone unimportant. He treated her like someone who could grow. He checked on progress only sometimes, never pushing too hard. One morning, while she was working near the barn, she accidentally dropped a heavy bucket. Water spilled everywhere. She quickly bent down, embarrassed, expecting someone to scold her like before. But nothing happened. A worker nearby helped her pick it up without saying anything rude. The rancher, who had seen the moment from a distance, simply turned away and continued his work. That small moment stayed in her mind longer than she expected. No anger, no judgment, just help. Slowly, she started to change, not because someone forced her, but because she felt safe enough to try. She began waking up earlier. She started completing tasks without being told twice. Her confidence was still fragile, but it was growing step by step. One evening, the rancher found her sitting outside the barn after finishing her work. She was looking at the sunset again, just like she used to do near the old fence in town. He stood nearby and spoke calmly. "You are learning fast," he said. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "I didn't think I could," she replied honestly. The rancher gave a small, understanding nod. "People believe many things about themselves," he said, "but most of those things are not final." She stayed quiet for a moment. His words were simple, but they stayed in her thoughts. Weeks passed. The ranch slowly became familiar to her. The sounds of horses, the morning routines, the open fields, all of it started to feel less strange. She still remembered her past, but it no longer controlled her every thought. One day, a small group of workers gathered for a simple task in the field. The rancher was present, observing. One of the workers suggested she take responsibility for organizing supplies for the day. At first, she hesitated. She was not used to being trusted with responsibility. But the rancher looked at her and gave a small nod. "Try," he said simply. She took a deep breath and agreed. It was not perfect. She made small mistakes, but she managed the task better than she expected. When it was finished, the work still got done on time. No one criticized her. Instead, they continued working as usual. That evening, she stood alone near the barn again. But this time, her silence was different. It was not the silence of rejection. It was the silence of reflection. She realized something important. She was no longer the same person who had sat at the old fence, invisible and forgotten. She was still learning, still healing, but she was no longer stuck. The rancher passed by and briefly stopped. "Tomorrow will be the same," he said. "More work, more learning." She nodded. But then, after a short pause, she spoke softly. "Thank you for asking me that question." The rancher looked at her for a moment, then gave a calm reply. "It was not a question," he said. "It was a door. You chose to walk through it." He then walked away slowly, leaving her standing under the evening sky. She looked around the ranch, the land, the people, the life she had now. For the first time, she did not feel like someone who had been rejected. She felt like someone who had begun again. And as the stars appeared above the open fields, her new life quietly continued, no longer defined by where she was left behind, but by where she had chosen to go.